The chandeliers at Leonard burned winter bright, a frost of light over velvet and glass. Jazz rose off the baby grand in slow, blue pores. The pedal breathed like a cat asleep. The room smelled of seared lemon and buttered shell, and a cologne that cost more than a used car. Knives shone with the hard innocence of surgical tools. The rule here was simple, and embroidered into the upholstery, speak softly or pay for the noise. Marcus Whitfield sat rigid in a suit that fit like a verdict. The cufflinks threw small flares whenever the chandelier blinked. Across from him, his son occupied the deep corner of the booth, as if the corner were the only trustworthy geometry in the room. Jamie was 8, knees high, shoulders testing the seam. His hands hovered by his ears but didn't cover them, waiting in case the air turned mean. Between them, a lobster reddened on a white plate, steam thinning like argument. "Jamie," Marcus said, barely moving his mouth. "Please." It was not a command. He had built a life on commands, on men adjusting chairs when he entered. This sounded like an apology that hadn't learned the word. Eyes skimmed them and slid away Leonard's specialty. Privacy plated for a fee. Somewhere near the bar, a bracelet chimed, glass kissed glass with dentist delicacy. The pianist folded a run into himself, dropped the room's spine, one vertebra, then held it there, polite. The server approached without announcing it. She stopped short of looming and knelt, so Jamie wouldn't need to crane. Apron folded cleanly, hair pinned without ceremony, brass oval on her chest. "Keisha." "Hi, Jamie," she said, low as the AC. "I'm going to sit where you can see me, then I'll go." No syrup, no game show encouragement. She slid 2 fingers toward the sconce and shaded it with her palm. The light obeyed, softening from interrogation to bedside. The pianist's left hand found minor without breaking melody. Jamie's rocking didn't stop, but its circle shrank and smoothed. A small planet. Remembering gravity, the lobster came back the way she had asked the kitchen to send it, portioned into moons on a side plate, ramekins like small satellites. Heat walked down from performance to human. She watched the boys orbit perfect loop, a hitch at midnight. Pattern is a raft. She hummed quietly, the nursery melody with bones showing, and placed a morsel not at his mouth, but inside the path his eyes were already traveling. "Orbit," she breathed, more note than word. Jamie sniffed like a scientist. "Two fingers, tested texture." A tap-tap ritual. He lifted, chewed 4 times, swallowed on an exhale. His right shoulder dropped half an inch. Most people would have missed it. Marcus felt the change, as if the room had shifted a degree and let him stand. Lower voice. Kesha said, still to the boy, "Angle your body. Keep your hands where he can see them. If he moves away, don't follow. Wait where he left you." Marcus obeyed. It felt like kneeling without the knees. He angled, palms open on linen, face turned, but not insisting. He said Jamie again with nothing tied to it. "No fix-me urgency. No, please." The room could smell. The pianist slipped Kesha's minor line under his left hand. The chandelier quit auditioning. Somewhere, a phone rose, then hesitated, then fell conscience or company. Jamie took a second moon, then a third. He didn't say thank you. He set his palm flat on the linen, a punctuation the table understood. "We'll stop," Kesha said, "end on a win." The check appeared. Marcus signed in a hand he hadn't used since he was nobody. Tip heavy enough to move gravity. Kesha slid away without costume, left through the narrow corridor that smelled of citrus peels and steam. The room absorbed the moment like good carpet takes spill. That was the magic of expensive rooms. They hid evidence. They didn't erase it. Outside, winter had teeth. In the back seat, Jamie fogged the window and drew a star 5 lines meeting cleanly. wrist steady like he'd practiced solo. Marcus raised a finger on the other side of the glass and traced the same shape, clumsy mirror. A father learning the grammar of pains and breath. When the heat thinned their work into transparency, they started again and again until the driver's wipers found a red light and rested. "Good job," Marcus said. Low. Hands visible. Jamie hummed 2 notes. Then a third, testing an interval. The city flared and flicked. A plane slid across the night like code. At home, the penthouse wore angles and quiet money. Marcus did not touch the chandelier. He dimmed lamps by degrees until the glass turned dark enough to reflect a man in an immaculate suit, with butter on his cuff and a face uninteresting with fatigue. He pressed his palm to the window. The print bloomed and faded. He kept his hand there anyway, as if holding a shape after it disappeared might convince it to stay. 3 days earlier, the elevator had been honest, climbing without music. 60 floors of security glass and doors that learned faces. The corner office presented the city like a chessboard he controlled. River a belt, bridges buckled, traffic a hive. Nora stood the way efficient people stand. Lean forward, wait on the solution. Board at 10, PR at noon. Doctor, Hendris called twice. She placed a folder down and left it paper instead of performance. At 10, the board wanted margins to behave. Marcus spoke in clean integers that didn't bleed when touched. Efficiency, refocus, sunset, non-core, discipline. The words did what they always did, arranged consent. He reached for the river after it refused to confirm anyone's importance. At 1, under fluorescent honesty and carpet in applesauce color, a pediatrician with a tie of small anchors said, "Your son reads the world at hurricane strength. We tone the wind down. Co-regulation, predictability, clear exits, low light, room temperature foods, therapies," Marcus asked, because nouns he could invoice made sense. Occupational therapy where the room doesn't buzz, speech through devices that don't tax eye contact as toll. Family training, a laminated schedule slid across. Door, water, food, quiet, bed icons that don't lie, and the... He stopped before he said programs, like a man stepping off a curb he didn't see. "The system is lean," Hendris said. "You'll meet waiting lists that don't move for checks. Some rooms that knew how to do this were sunset." He said the corporate word with the carefulness of a physician handling a blade. The syllables found something he'd buried under slides and signed memos. He rode the elevator to the roof without permission and let the wind do what it wanted with his hair. He typed into his phone, "Independent board mais endowment, nu donor veto. Governance with teeth. Publish failure." He stared at the words until the screen judged him. He saved the note and didn't send it to anyone. Not yet. Back at Leonard, Kesha rolled silverware with jeweler attention, wiped a water glass until it admitted to being glass. Ralph chewed gum and told somebody to 86 the halibut. She tucked the orbit into a soft place under her sternum, where she kept small wins and bus schedules. On the bus home, she texted a picture of 3-star stickers on a piano C. F. G to a contact labeled Lena. "Still works." She wrote, "Make room where they forgot to." Lena answered. Kesha hummed 2 notes into her scarf. The bus, miraculous or coincidental, found the key. Marcus stood again at his window. The building made the low machine noise rich buildings make when they're pretending to be boats. The city laid out its teeth. On the glass, his handprint bloomed and faded and bloomed again. Meteorology and skin. He lifted his palm and, on impulse, traced a star he had no right to trace. It softened back into nothing by schedule. He kept his hand there anyway. The next night he practiced at the counter, rice in small moons, lemon quarantine, ramekin orbit offered, orbit accepted. He angled his body, kept his hands visible. He matched his son's hitch at 12 o'clock, like a student tracing a teacher's chalk line. When Jamie tapped the done square, Marcus let the ending be an ending. He didn't gild it with victory. Correct is quieter than triumph. He called the number on the Leonard check and left a message for the server whose name he didn't deserve to know and now did. "I don't know what this is yet," he said, "but thank you for the hands." He tipped the line cooks through the owner with a note that did not use virtue. It used policy. Envelopes showed up Friday, heavy enough to remind a wrist that gravity lives in paper. 2. On the bus, the same hour, Kesha checked a voicemail she hadn't expected to get. His voice was lower, careful not to spook the air through the phone. She listened once, twice. She didn't save it. She didn't delete it either. She put her head back against the glass and drew a small star in breath she knew would disappear by the next stop. 5 lines. And because rules can bend for love a sixth, evidence evaporates on schedule. Practice stays. Dawn scraped frost off the river like a windshield wiper, one pane at a time. Towers blinked awake. In the corner office, the HVAC breathed a practiced cold. Coffee steamed on a coaster that had never once seen a ring. Nora set a tablet beside the cup. Overnight, she said, 2 blogs, 1 tabloid. No majors. On screen, grainy stills. A kneeling server. A child turned away. A man in a suit, calibrated to authority. Captions in vitamin-selling fonts. Marcus didn't sit. He pressed 5 fingertips to the glass and left ovals of warmth. Hold statements. Drafted. Nora said, "We can respect privacy and decline to comment. Legal like silence." "Good," he said. "Silence is a skill I'm late to." He reached for another folder. Hendriss's packet words, steady and clinic type, co-regulation, visual schedule, predictable meals, sensory-friendly spaces. He paused on a line about room temperature options, as if the paper hummed. When Geeta arrived, she didn't waste grace. Council hair pinned, flats built for stairs and fights. She set a thin stack on the table and nudged it with one finger. "If you're actually going to do this," she said, "you build a firebreak between money and mission. Endowment, independent board, conflicts policy with bite. I don't want my name on the door." "Then put your rules there," she said. 3 family seats, 2 clinician seats, 1 neurodivergent adult with actual power, 1 community seat, 1 worker from the field you intend to affect. Publish budgets, publish failures. Donors get no veto. Not even you. Teeth, he said. "You'll hate them," she replied. "That's how you'll know they work." He looked past his reflection to the river that refused everyone's story. "Find me parents who will sit in those chairs and tell me no. I already called," she said. She left a card with 3 names and a star in the corner like a private joke. Leonard smelled like lemon rinds and hot plates in the narrow corridor, where servers learned to dance or burn. Kesha tied her apron until it felt like a belt she could trust. Ralph intercepted her near the host stand, gum clicking like a metronome for anxiety. "Management says optics," he said. "They want you off that section." "How long is optics?" "Till the segment dies." He tried a smile on and put it back. "Take Maurice's tables party at 21. City council money. Room temp if they bring kids," she said automatically. "Councilmen don't bring kids." His wince apologized for itself. She set the quiet corner anyway. Dimmer discovered with 2 fingers. PNSI caught and nodded. A star sticker, small as a wink, placed where brass met sconce. Chef Leo slid past with a plate and said, without drama, "Your arbitric, my nephew, works. Not a trick," she said. A translation. Between turns, she texted a number labeled Hendris. Restaurant can do dim. Music down. Room temp. Need letters so managers stop flinching. The reply came quick. Drafting protocols. Include lux ranges and a 2-minute quiet option. Her thumb paused on 2-minute. She liked clocks that made room. By afternoon, the tabs had captions that tasted like iron. In Monaco, light too clean to forgive. Margaret scrolled until the glass warmed her hand. Her lawyer, Bram, stood like an indictment waiting for a judge. "She's a waitress," Margaret said, flicking not the photo but what it represented. "Our son is not a spectacle." "He isn't," Bram said. "The question is venue. If you want to move, we file for a temporary injunction. Instability, media harm, inappropriate boundaries. Do it," she said. "Say stability 3 times. Judges love it. It will bring more light. Then have them close it." She smoothed an invisible crease in the sofa. "And stop trying to sound noble. It doesn't fit." He nodded. The way men nod when a different argument threatens to be human. He would shape concern into a blade and call it responsible. At home, Patience had drywall dust on it. The kitchen light hummed on a frequency that made Jamie's scalp think about leaving. Marcus flicked the dimmer. The buzz softened into something a nervous system might tolerate. He plated rice in small moon, waited, offered orbit instead of order. He kept his hands where they could be seen. New religion, no hymnal. Jamie traced the wood-grain circle. The hitch at 12 o'clock, a notarized signature. Marcus matched it, 1 foot above the plate. A father consenting to be a moon. One bite happened. Another almost did. A small palm landed on a laminated square labeled Don, and the world ended correctly. He called Kesha because some verbs require the person who taught your hands. "He ate too," Marcus said, voice low, like telling a skittish animal there's no trap. "Two is a feast if the room isn't a bully," she said. Metal pinged in the background as the cooling rack remembered its shape. "I'd like to pay you for what you already did," he said. "Retroactive. Pay the line cooks," she said. "They moved mountains for that plate, and no one will put it in their review." He did. The envelopes arrived Friday, heavy as respect. Evening clothed itself, and reporters bred on the sidewalk like polite locusts. Kesha kept her head down and her toes inside the grout's patient lines. A mic found her chin. "How does it feel to be at the center?" "I'm at my job," she said. "Please don't make it harder." Inside, the room had put on its crystal armor. She loosened it by degrees. Dimmer. Minor. Ramekins. Aligned where an orbit would pass. She marked the corner booth with a tiny star that looked like a print error only a trained eye could find. The pianist met her look. "Not yet," she mouthed. He stayed in major like a gentleman waiting to be asked. Marcus arrived with his son like weather after an apology. He stood at an angle. Hands visible. Voice quiet as linen. Jamie tapped the menu photo of rice twice, then tapped the table where his circle would live. Kesha matched it with her own body, bent to 45, facing, not cornering. Somewhere a glass broke, and no one flinched enough to bruise the air. In the kitchen pass, Leo murmured, "Room temp plate now," and someone cooled porcelain to a number the mouth would not argue with. Between courses, Ralph whispered, "Owner wants to talk policy, says pilot like he invented it. Training stipends," she said. Printed 2-minute option at host stand, a sign bigger than a whisper. Ralph chewed the phrase 2-minute, like it might chip a tooth. 2 minutes. You'd be shocked what you can change in 2, she said. Start by choosing to. Across the river, Bram's motion drafted itself into crisp capitals and citation spine. Emergency application for temporary relief pending custody review. The affidavit leaned on what plays well at angles: stability, safety, boundaries, public exposure. No mention of butter, no minor key. Gita read it in courthouse fluorescent. Satisfaction. Dry and exact. She dialed as she walked, heels declaring law on tile. They filed, she said, when Marcus answered. We respond. We don't posture. What do we say? That we have a plan, she said. We submit Hendris's protocol. Point to the room that works. Offer to be monitored. Show governance with teeth. Judges like plans more than panic. Do I need to talk? You need to listen, she said. And bring a pen. He brought two, and the Hendris packet, and a checkbook that used to feel like power, and now felt like obligation dressed correctly. The second seating learned how silence can be generous. Kesha ended on a win and slid away. She untied her apron in a corridor where steam smelled faintly of citrus rinds and regret. On the bus home, she texted Lena a photo, 3-star stickers on a piano key. Still works. Lena sent back a constellation and a sentence. Make room where they forgot to. Streetlights studded the route like pins in a map no one had published. Morning. The city stretched a spine of bridges and rails. In the office that loved glass, Brand Counsel pitched redemption arcs like he was selling weather. Rename the thing, he said. Put your name back on it. Own the narrative. I don't, Marcus said. You should, the man said. It's a defense. Gita slid bylaws across the table like rebar. It's a liability, she said. Name stays off. Board stays independent. We keep publishing failure. We keep rooms working. Brand Counsel smiled with incisors. You'll bleed for this. Then we bleed, Marcus said. Eyes on the river. It moved like a sentence that couldn't afford adjectives. Kesha clocked in to find a printed form and a soft-voiced threat, unpaid leave, pending review. HR said, spelling environment wrong in the memo's second line. She signed because rent doesn't respect conviction. She set the corner anyway before she left. Dimmer noted. Pianist briefed. Star sticker remade. Bring back rules. Ralph whispered as she walked past the pass. She didn't go home. Gita's office had a table that made paper feel like work, not performance. Tell me exactly what you did. Gita said, not why. Verbs. Dimmed the sconce with my hand. Kesha said, signaled the pianist. Ramekins. Side plate. Room temp. Hummed minor to map his orbit. Food entered the path. His eyes already traveled. Body angled at 45. Hans visible. No touch. Ended on a win. Times. Sat 7. Sancherluke. Food down 7. Sishijo. First bite 7. Wushasan. Stop 8. Ling-yi. Gita wrote, without letting ink get cute. Good, she said. We'll ask the court for accommodations on the record. Low light. Headphones if needed. Visual schedules allowed. We'll stipulate no media. And governance. Teeth, Kesha said. Bite marks you can see from space. The restaurant logs arrived, courtesy of Nora, a neat chain. Dimmer levels by table. Piano set list. Plate cooldowns in degrees, more honest than spin. Chef Leo agreed to swear to the thermometer. The pianist agreed to swear to pedal half. Hendris printed the protocol and laminated the care plan like a rare map. Reporters waited outside Leonard again, as if the building could confess. Please don't make it harder to do my job, Kesha said, and kept walking. It wasn't a line. It was policy. Night cut clean. Jamie traced a star on fogged glass, with a wrist steady like he'd been practicing alone. Marcus mirrored clumsily. and didn't insist the lines meet. He left room for error like you leave room at a table for a latecomer. Somewhere else, a motion slid across a clerk's desk at 8:03 a.m. and found its number somewhere else. A judge read without her face, telling you whether the page would be mercy or math. In the quiet between, a city learned a minor key. A room remembered where to stand. 2 minutes hid in the pocket of a woman's apron, waiting to be used like a match in wind. Gita stacked exhibits into a redwell and snapped the string. "We have our plan," she said. "Not triumph, just logistics. Now we make a room out of a courtroom, and if they try to flood it," Marcus asked, "we lower the tide," she said. "Ons visible." Voice down. "Wait where they left us." He nodded like a student, reciting an oath he intended not to betray. Past the window, the river kept moving, expensive and indifferent. In the hall, the elevator chimed, somewhere downstairs. A bracelet chimed back. Practice waited. Teeth glinted. The day put on its coat. Chalk dust clung to the riverside hallway like memory. Midday light slid through wire mesh windows and broke itself into squares on the floor, one warm tile, one cool, a checkerboard no one asked to play. In room 12, the radiator clicked its old metal song. Paper stars hung over a battered upright. 3 stickers C, F, G curled at the edges where small fingers worried them during good news. Kesha stood with a clipboard, and a calm earned by repetition, not temperament. 15 kids moved through stations like weather. Mateo lined up toy cars by axles and made the traffic obey. A girl named Lolly stacked plastic cups in strict chroma order until the pyramid looked inevitable. Deshaun pressed his forehead to the cool of a cinder block and breathed. "The aide, Denise," whispered to a kitchen timer and made it agree. "Play, then snack," Kesha said, and the room borrowed her cadence. She set the metronome on the piano. Its wooden triangular heart began measuring kindness in beats per minute. The principal waited in the doorway with a smile meant for donors. In his hand, an envelope pretended to be neutral. 2 minutes, he asked. His voice tried to step lightly on linoleum and failed. Kesha glanced at the room. "Play," she told the kids again, then stepped into the hall. The corridor smelled like floor cleaner and rained on wool. "Budget adjustment," he said, tapping the flap twice, as if to rouse courage from stationery. "Central wants a pilot to merge sensory rooms into general ed support." "Pilot," she repeated, the word tinny as a bad bell. "Which part lands quietly and which part crashes?" He didn't smile. He had learned not to. "They want outcomes we can show on one sheet. Attendance, suspensions, benchmark movement. We have outcomes," she said. 3 kids eat lunch without vomiting now. 4. Tolerate the gym at half volume. 1 stopped hitting his head when we switched to warm fluorescence. "Those don't look good on a bar chart, but they look good on a skull." He slid the envelope toward her like a coaster. "They want proof that scales. I have proof that breathes." Her throat felt like she'd swallowed a thumbtack head first. "When?" "June." His eyes flicked toward the room. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry in fluorescent," she said. "It reads as performative." Back inside, a boy's hand hovered near the snack bin and dared Lemon to behave. Kesha knelt, matched his angle, hummed a minor line, and slid a rice cup into his orbit. He took it without flinching, the envelope pressed between her shoulder blades like a sun. Dismissal came with Velcro, and the soft thunder of small shoes after the last backpack cleared the door. She taped the star back onto middle C with scotch. She paid for herself and the stubbornness of someone who refused to let a sticker decide when it was done. Night made her apartment honest. Steam hissed in the pipes like tired applause. She spread the papers on her kitchen table, laminate nicked, chair wobbling, called Denise, then a mother, then a behavior therapist, who deserved more than a consulting fee. They drafted a map on scrap paper, letters, testimony, photos of practice, one spare word at the top, receipts. She wrote, "Governor," and crossed it out because the governor wore sunglasses at ribbon cuttings in schools that would never need hers. When she finally lay down, the radiator thunked once in the dark like an old heart surprised to still be working. She hummed the metronome's beat into the pillow. Sleep didn't come. Practice stayed. 5 years earlier, 60 floors above a river. The color of litigation. A boardroom carpet inhaled and exhaled in tasteful gray. Presentation screens glowed summer blue. Sushi wilted in its own good intentions. On the slide, Education Division Q3. Variance. The men at the table looked relaxed in the way of people backed by capital. Non-core programs continue to drag, said the man with the clicker, voice trained to make verbs sound inevitable. Percentages learned their choreography. Bars swallowed smaller bars. A woman from operations, hair braided tight enough to keep a ship in port, raised a hand. "There's reputational risk," she said. "These centers have names and alumni who can speak." "Will message transition," he replied. "Center of Excellence becomes a portal. Kids access resources at home." He did not flinch at his own quotation marks. Around the table, no one else did either. An analyst tapped a spreadsheet like a weather report. "Per site cash burn," he said, making the numbers line up like soldiers who had never met a child. The clicker moved the room. Projected savings 24 months, ate a smaller bar, and smiled without teeth. "Any objections?" the chair asked. No one wanted to be the person who said we're good at making money from everything except the hard parts. No one wanted to say I visited one of those rooms. It smelled like pencils and patience, and I felt something I couldn't monetize. The nod traveled like infection. The man with the clicker nodded back and signed after lunch. He didn't read the attachments. Later he stood at a window in an apartment high enough to confuse weather with choice, and told himself leadership was choosing who paid. The river argued back in a language only bodies hear later. 2 years after the carpet nodded, and 1 lifetime after room 12. A pediatric clinic's waiting room measured time with a fish tank. Bubbles rose like practiced optimism. A clownfish refused to be impressed. In exam 3, Dr. Hendris read aloud from neat clinical hand. "Autism spectrum," he said. "Language delayed. Sensory sensitivities marked. Strengths in pattern recognition. Motor plan intact." He looked up. He sees the world sharp. That can be a gift without turning it into a job. A father's hand tightened on a folder until the paper grew a crescent. "Services." "Yes," Hendris said, with the patience of bureaucracy and the urgency of parenthood. "Occupational therapy. Speech through devices that don't tax eye contact as toll. A school IEP that protects his nervous system instead of training it to submit." He slid a laminated schedule across door. "Water. Food. Quiet. Bed. You practice until he knows what the next room will be without guessing." The man nodded like nodding. "Could move a line. We'll pay." "You will," Hendry said, "and you'll meet waiting lists that won't be moved by checks. Some of the places that knew how to do this have been sunset." He used the corporate verb like a scalpel. The word found a bruise the father hadn't named. Later, in a car that smelled like upholstery and delay, he typed names of programs he had once voted to fold. He stared at the list until the screen went to sleep. When Riverside finally closed, the last day arrived without a mayor. The children did routine heavy enough to keep their faces attached. The boxes took the weight no policy ever could. "You can keep one thing," Denise told each kid, "not furniture." Lolly chose a chew ring that had known teeth and refused to break. Deshawn chose a laminated done card because he loved ending correctly. Mateo peeled the C sticker from the piano with 2 fingernails, held it in his palm like a planet, and didn't show anyone. At 4, they locked the door. Kesha slid the key under the mat the way you do in apartments when you still believe in returning up. She took the photograph room 12 inches summer light from the wall and put it in her bag. She didn't look back. Looking back makes the ground mean. The next week, she swapped her ID lanyard for an apron. The staff room at Leonard smelled like 100 kinds of soup and a microwave that judged none of them. She learned table numbers, pivot points, the flourish. Her wrists didn't want. She learned which corners of the dining room hoarded noise the way a street hoards heat. She found the dimmer with 2 fingers and the pianist with an eyebrow, then found a quiet corner and made it obey. Money was clean and not enough. Work was smaller, and then it wasn't. She carried plates and other people's evenings. She carried a river of kids who had taught her where to stand, so a room could breathe. On a Tuesday, with the kind of rain that makes a city smell like everything it ever was, she slid the Riverside photo behind her transit card, the edges bent in sympathy. On break, she took it out and studied the tiny figures Denise's braid, the janitor's anchor tattoo, the corner of a metronome practicing stillness. She put the picture away, tightened her apron, went back to work. By spring, the district's pilot had a press release and a hole where a room used to be. Parents met in church basements that smelled like coffee and mercy. Kesha taught them hinge tricks on folding chair. Angle your body, hands visible, wait where you were left. Denise demoed a 2-minute truce with a phone's flashlight under a mixing bowl. A mother cried into a napkin without scaring anyone. A grandfather said, "This sounds like manners," and everyone in the room exhaled as if someone had finally named it. At Leonard, Chef Leo learned to walk heat down off sizzle to human. The pianist learned her minor line like a second spine. Ralph learned to spot a journalist pretending to look at the wine list. Management learned to say optics with their teeth together. Kesha started keeping a log in the same block letters she used on clipboards. Table 20 845 lux. Plate at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Minor in left hand. Orbit engaged. Ended on a win. She slipped a star sticker onto the sconce stem where brass met wall. Staff learned to find it when their eyes forgot. She kept her rent by inches. She kept her hands visible. She kept choosing not to be famous in rooms that rewarded performance. At night, she practiced the 2-minute truce without witnesses. Lampshale tilde. Breath measured. Body angled toward absence. She timed how long it took for her own shoulders to let go. Sometimes the elevator in her building muttered, and the day unraveled. Sometimes a taxi horn cut wrong, and her throat climbed. Sometimes everything did what it should, and the hinge still squeaked. On those days she counted small wins the way other people count cash. 1 bite, 1 breath, 1 hand on a piano bench where C used to be. When the district sent another letter, sunset complete, assets redeployed. She spread it on the kitchen table next to the Riverside photo and traced the stickers on the keys with a dry fingertip. The phone lit with a text from Denise. Lolly ate an apple at room temp. No gag. She stared at the words until her eyes watered from cheap light. She wrote back, "Receipts." The night before the courthouse would decide the shape of a morning, Kesha set 3-star stickers on a piano key in a school that no longer existed. It was a photograph, but her body didn't care. She hummed the 2 notes, and then the third, minor, the one that knows where grief lives but refuses to pitch a tent. The room moved in her memory. Kids learned to breathe again. She slid the photo into a sleeve, and taped 3 tiny stars to the back where no one could see them. C. F. G. Home keys for people who aren't offered one and build it anyway. On the bus, a baby wailed until the driver, old, patient, tapped the glass twice above his head. The aisle learned the frequency. Conversations softened half a notch. The baby paused to listen to his own voice in a kinder room and decided to stop. The mother mouthed, "Thank you," at nobody and everyone. Kesha smiled and didn't look long. Staring spooks magic, she texted a friend at a clinic. Would a judge let a lamp into a courtroom? The reply came back with 3 words and a star. If someone asks, at home, she wrote the ask on an index card in block letters. A bailiff could understand. She placed it beneath the riverside photo and turned off the light. The building hummed like a boat, pretending not to be docked. She put her hand on the window. A star bloomed in breath and thinned on schedule. She kept her hand there anyway. The cameras showed up before the bread truck. By 8, the sidewalk outside Leonard was a lane of black cases and brushed hair. Lenses blinked open like eyes, practicing sympathy. The maitre d' unlocked the door with the smile he kept for health inspectors. The pianist arrived in a jacket that could pass for day, glanced at the crowd, and said nothing. Kesha came on foot from the bus stop, coffee warming her hands through thin paper, apron rolled in her tote like a flag she'd promised not to wave. The air smelled of damp wool and the overripe pears dumped in the grocer's crate. She rounded the alley to the staff door and found crates of herbs sweating, boxes of citrus stacked wrong, a dolly blocking the way. The back might as well have been brick. She went through the front. A microphone rose toward her chin. "How does it feel?" "I'm at work," she said, not slowing. "Please don't make it harder." Inside, citrus and steam. Ralph intercepted by the host stand, gum clicking a new tempo. "Management says optics," he murmured. "Unpaid leave. For now." "How long is now?" Her voice stayed level, though something in her throat stepped back. "Until the segment dies," he said. He didn't meet her eyes. "I'll argue. But they hate arguments." "Tell Leo room temp," she said. "Keep the quiet corner ready. Pianist minor. Only when requested. 2 minutes printed at the host stand or you'll have a mutiny." "We don't do mutinious," he said, but he wrote it down. She signed a form that smelled like toner and losing. In the staff room, she opened her wallet, touched the photo, tucked behind her transit card, 3-star stickers on C, F, G, and put it back. She tied the apron anyway, walked the floor like muscle memory might still count for something. Then her phone trembled. Unknown number. She let it hit voicemail, then listened, with the speaker pressed to her ear like a secret. "Ms. Williams, this is Geeta Rao, counsel. We're responding to an emergency motion at 2. I need your hands, your memory, your calm. Can you come?" She texted Ralph, "I'm out. You owe me a staff meal when this dies." He replied with a steak emoji. "And bring back rules." The bus to downtown rattled its old bones and took the turns like a careful roomer. She stood, holding the strap, and hummed a minor third through her teeth. The aisle found its length. Geeta's office lived in a building that didn't try to impress you. Elevator buttons with the metal rubbed thin. Hall carpet that sounded like a throat cleared. Inside, a long table, plain chairs, a view of brick that let you get work done. On the table lay a stack clipped into submission. Emergency application for temporary relief pending custody review. Headings in firm fonts. Exhibits labeled. Screenshots. Grainy photos. Affidavits. The word stability arranged to look like law. Geeta slid a legal pad toward her. "Verbs," she said. "Exactly what you did and when." Dimmed the sconce with my hand. Kesha said, signaled the pianist with a look. Food walked down from sizzle to human. Orbit matched my arm, drew his circle, not near his mouth, in his eyes lane. Ramekins. Side plate. Hands visible. Voice low. Angled body at 45. No touch. Ended on a win. Times. She closed her eyes. Re-entered the room like a sound check. Sat at 7:36. Food down at 7:49. First bite, 7:53. Stopped 8:01. Gita wrote. Pen barely whispering. Anything that can be corroborated. Manager's log has dimmer changes. Kesha said. Chef can testify cooling curve. Pianist can swear to tempo. If you want history, I can swear to a closed classroom. And who signed the memo? We aren't opening with blood, Gita said. Not unless they do. She nodded to the doorway. Doctor. Hendris arrived smelling like coffee and clean hands. He placed a laminated visual schedule on the table as if it were Exhibit A, which it was. He reads rooms at hurricane strength, he said. We tone the wine down. 2 sentences a judge can cite, Gita asked. Co-regulation lowers sensory load. We accommodate the nervous system so learning can occur. He met Kesha's eye, then Gita's. A quiet table is not a spectacle. It's physics. Nora appeared with a manila envelope, and the look of someone who had convinced 3 calendars to be polite. Restaurant log, she said, laying down printouts, dimmer levels by table, plate temperatures, the piano set list annotated with a careful AM/PM, chain of custody stapled to the cover in tidy type. Kesha stared at the details. Lux, 8045, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Starlight, in a minor proof that a quiet night had left a trail. That mattered. We'll ask the court to honor sensory accommodations on the record, Gita said. Dimmed lights. Permission to use headphone. Visual schedules in the courtroom. We'll stipulate to no media. And governance. Nora asked. We preview an independent board with teeth. Gita replied. Not his name. Rules. Kesha's phone buzzed. One word from a friend at the clinic. Courage. She slipped the phone back into her pocket like a tool and looked at the clock. The county courthouse smelled like paper warmed by breath. Security trays clattered. Belts whispered through fingers. Down the hall, someone taped family room to a door in block letters. A spell in Scotch tape. Bram Klein waited outside 4B, suit blade sharp, face set to responsible. Margaret stood beside him. Coat draped over her forearm, hair so disciplined it almost didn't move. She kept her gaze on the floor tile, as if it had been selected for her. Gita approached, extended a hand that meant battle without theatrics. We'll stipulate to no press in the courtroom, she said, and to sensory accommodations. Of course, Bram said smoothly, stability demands care. He could make truce sound like leverage. The camera crew stays in the hall, Gita added without looking at Margaret. I'm here as a mother, Margaret said, voice pitched for microphones that weren't present. Then this will be easy, Gita said. The bailiff opened the door. The courtroom held wood and fluorescent mercy. Elise D'Angelo wore calm like an unadorned ring. The clock above the seal ticked a polite public time. On the emergency motion, the judge said, Petitioner, proceed. Bram rose. Your Honor, we seek narrow relief. Temporary restrictions to ensure stability. The child's exposure to public settings, interactions with non-licensed individuals. Objection to characterization, Gita said, rising. We have protocols, not exposures, logs, not conjecture. Miss Rao, the judge said, witnesses. Dr. Hendris first. He took the stand like a man who had washed his hands and rolled his sleeves. Autism often involves sensory processing differences, he said. Steady as pulse. Bright light and unpredictable sound can register as pain. Co-regulation uses the caregiver's nervous system to lower the room. In English, the judge said, not unkind. We make the room kinder, he said. Lower light, lower voice. Match rhythm. Don't demand. Is the restaurant protocol safe? Gita asked. It's safer than most cafeterias, he said. A ripple moved through the room and stilled. Precise. Logged. Replicable. Not a whim. Bram stood. Doctor, do you condone therapy by waitstaff? I condone families eating without bleeding, Hendra said, and rooms that know how to pause. Kesha swore in with her palm flat, mouth a straight line. Gita kept it surgical. Describe your actions. She did. Dimmer, minor key, orbit, hands, wait, end on a win. No touch, she said. Touch is expensive. Bram held up a grainy photo, like a promise. You are not licensed, he said. You have a history with special needs education. I have a past with rooms that work, she said. Is it true those rooms lost funding? Yes. Is it true, Mr. Whitfield's company was involved? She glanced at the table, where a man stared at wood like it held water. It is, she said. The temperature dropped a measurable degree. Gita didn't object. The truth belonged here or nowhere. The judge leaned forward. Ms. Williams, do you have reason to believe your involvement is self-serving? I have rent, Kesha said, and hands that know what to do. If I wanted to be famous, I'd be worse at my job. A corner of the judge's mouth thought about a smile and changed its mind. Fair. Chef Leo testified next. Coat clean. Forearms tattooed with herbs labeled in Latin. He spoke in the grammar of kitchens. We cooled the plate to 100, he said. We logged. We trained the past to go quiet. Room temp isn't neglect. It's respect. Counsel, the judge said. Argument. Bram's voice was a bridge built to hold SUVs. We don't punish care. We ask for licensed oversight and boundaries, while the court reviews avoid ad hoc improvisation that could be misinterpreted. Gita spoke without ornament. They want to enjoin repair because it makes for better television. She said, we have a plan. A clinician, logs, and a child who ate a meal without harm. The petitioner has a segment. Silence sat down. The judge took off her glasses the way people do when the decision has already landed. Motion denied, she said. I will not enjoin quiet. A beat. Conditions. Formal care plan under Dr. Hendriss's supervision. Sensory accommodations memorialized. No media in the child's presence. Governance of any support entity to be independent of Mr. Whitfield. With reporting to this court for 6 months, she turned to the table. Sign it today. Yes, Your Honor, said the man at the table. It came out like gratitude that had borrowed a suit. Margaret's jaw tightened, then let go. Bram nodded a professional loss, measured, filed. He glanced at Keisha, just a flicker like a man cataloging a new geometry. Anything further? The judge asked. No, Your Honor. Gita said, thank you for letting the room be kinder. The gavel landed like a small, polite cough. Court rose. Time resumed its easier lie. In the hallway, microphones hovered at the rope. Nora guided the man around glass with the ease of a river cutting stone. Gita gave one sentence to air. The order speaks, then folded the packet, like a blade, back into its sheath. Kesha found a bench under a window, cleaned to a streaky honesty. She sat. She did not cry. She pressed her palm to the pane. Heat drew a star in breath. 5 lines that met. She added a small 6th. Because rules could love you now. A shadow fell on the glass beside hers. The man sat at the far end of the bench, far enough to be right, near enough to be human. He kept his eyes on the window, as if it could carry an apology. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not a tactic. A fact. Don't be sorry," she said. "Be boring. Write checks you don't control. Publish failure. Keep your hands visible." He nodded. It sounded like practice. It would have to become one. Across the hall, a bailiff dimmed the lights. One notch for the next case without knowing why. In the family room, a child tapped a laminated Doan square with ceremonial gravity. On a corkboard near security, someone had posted a sign in block letters. 2 minutes on request. No logo. Tape corners dog-eared already. Kesha lifted her hand. The star thinned, then vanished. She kept her palm against the glass anyway, as if holding a shape after it disappears could convince it to stay. Outside, a busknelt. Inside, a clock ticked. The building remembered what it had learned. Quiet is not empty. It's a choice. Rain stitched the morning into one sheet. Thin needles, steady hand. The office they'd borrowed had carpet that hid coffee, and a window that faced brick. The table was scarred in the right places, edges softened by elbows, a surface where budgets turned into sentences. Gita put a stack of paper at the center like an altar you sign. Bylaws. She said, "No donor veto." Conflict of interest with teeth. 2-year staggered terms. 3 family directors. 2 clinicians. 1 neurodivergent adult with a vote that counts. 1 restaurant worker. 1 community seat. Rotating chair. Independent ombuds. Budgets published quarterly. Her finger tapped clauses as if checking a pulse. Dual signatures on disbursements. Stipends for family board members. Childcare reimbursed. "We are not performing poverty." The radiator clicked. Fluorescence hummed, then decided not to. Gwen Danum Yacket. Handwriting, like a threat, raised a hand. "Childcare is real money." "Right," she said. "Not a coffee voucher wearing a mask." "Direct deposit," Nora said from the corner, already filling cells in a spreadsheet. "W2 seconds if you want them. 1999 if you don't." Mateo and Noor spread clinic notes like maps. "Training modules," Noor said. "Short videos. No lectures. Visuals you can use during a lunch rush." 2 titles. Mateo offered, uncapping a Sharpie. "How to lower a room." "The 2-minute truce." "Ep," said Ellie. "Share backwards." Laptop opened to a wireframe that looked like a subway if trains were human needs. The jacket was jacketed in pins, planets, a tiny fork. 1 star. Restaurants opt in. Families filter by light. Nuaz. Patience. No ratings for food. Ratings for accommodations. Parents log micro wins. Stayed 10 minutes. Tried a new texture. Data private by default. Aggregates public. So policy people can pretend it was their idea. Lamp, Kesha added. She set a ring wrapped in bubble wrap on the table. A soft halo with a cord and the promise of mercy. Signal on request. It glows for 2 minutes. Everyone lowers. Light. Voice. Expectations. No speeches. Harold slid a laminated sheet across the table. Kitchen protocol printed in a font line. Cook's respect. Cooling curve for hot plates. Room temp by request. Labels for lemon. Silent pass when the ring breathes. He grinned around a toothpick. And for the love of God, no microgreens on kids' plates. 10 minutes late. Bryce arrived carrying a tube like an apology wrapped in branding. He unrolled a poster that swooped. "The Whitfield Foundation," he announced, elevating potential. The room went museum quiet. Gita didn't look at the paper. "We're CNSE," she said. "Center for Nervous System Empathy. It starts ugly and stays honest. Bryce kept smiling. You need a narrative. We have one, Gwen said. It's called Dinner. Marcus sat 2 chairs from the end. Jacket off. Pen lined up with the page margin. He had practiced being furniture. Seed funding is in, he said. Irrevocable endowment. Governance is yours. I don't vote. Bryce tilted his head. You're ceding control to amateurs. To practitioners, Marcus said, and let the pen rest. Motion to adopt bylaws. Gita said, second. Noor said, hands rose, Gwen. Noor. Mateo. Harold. Eli. Marcus kept his down and said, I abstain, as if respect had an address. Leonard's staff room smelled like burned toast and hand soap. Kesha folded her apron and wrote her name on a paper bag. Block letters, neat as a midterm. Ralph leaned in the doorway. I'm gone. Eyes on the tile. They made it official, he said. Termination. Disruption of service environment. They spelled environment wrong. How long did you argue? 5 minutes, he said, which is a year in restaurant time. Tell Leo thanks, she said. Keep cooling plates. We will, he said. Your corner's still yours. She tugged the knot loose and handed him the apron anyway. On her way out, she paused by the dimmer. Tapped it once, muscle memory and benediction. Back at the borrowed office, the ring lamp stood on a milk crate like a moon that had chosen work. Eli plugged it in. The ring breathed to life. 2 minutes, Eli said, and the whole room, without planning to, went still. Fluorescence softened. Someone's phone dimmed of its own accord. Breath found a pocket. The ring faded. Relief came with a cheap laugh because the body needed a release valve. Manifest for partners, Nora said, typing. Training this week. Equipment drop next. Pilot at 3 locations. 4, Harold said. Cousin has a lunch counter in Sunset Park. He'll try anything if you pay him in rice cookers. Done. Gita said. We'll buy 2, and a barber. Gwen added, if it works under clippers, we can claim turf. Eli's eyebrows went bright. We'll add a non-restaurant category. Barber. Library. Busroute. Busroute? Marcus asked. Drivers already know who needs quiet. Gwen said, we'll give them a sign. Tap twice. Print them heavy stock. Nora said, city air eats paper thin. The lamp went to work that night. The first request came at 6:12. 2 gentle taps from a father who kept his eyes on the menu. Because asking is easier when you look at nouns. The ring glowed. Conversations softened. A fork paused mid-air. The pianist, hired for weekends and minor miracles, slipped into A minor with his left hand. In the corner booth, a boy's fists loosened like lids under warm water. 2 minutes breathed. The room rose. Dessert got ordered. The server didn't smile at the table. She smiled at the lamp. Kesha logged the activation on the app. Honored. No walkouts. 1 unnecessary comment at bar. De-escalated. The ombud's inbox pinged hello. At a library with carpet soft as apology, a head librarian taped up a sign in sans serif. When someone taps twice, we lower. The first time a mother tapped, the storytime leader pitched her voice down without losing rhythm. The ring sat on a cart near picture books and glowed like a moon practicing. On the 27 bus, a driver taped a card behind his head. Kiat requests. Honored. Tap the glass twice. At rush hour, a teenager tried it as a joke, then watched a bus full of bodies actually lower. He didn't try again. He told his brother like a secret. At home, routine grew edges and then rounded them. The visual schedule sat under a lemon magnet on the fridge. Jaime tapped door with grave authority. Marcus stood at an angle, hands where they could be seen. Kesha leaned on the jamb, diagonal, not blocking. Just here. Rice. The boy said, consonant softer than the room deserved. Rice? Marcus echoed. Ramekin. Orbit offered. Orbit met. 2 bites. A palm on done, like a judge who didn't need to pound a done, Kesha said. Not triumph. Correctness. They practiced what to do with a bad night. We leave the table, Kesha said. We don't leave the room. 2 minutes in the hallway. Lamp. If we need it. She set her phone flashlight to warm and made a poor man's ring on the credenza. It worked enough to be worth the joke. Sometimes the elevator muttered and the world unraveled. Sometimes a taxi honked on the wrong beat and a day lost its skin. Sometimes everything obeyed and the hinge still squeaked. Those nights felt like defeat until you counted bites. Until you watched a handprint bloom and fade on glass and remembered evidence evaporates on schedule. Practice stays. By Friday they had data. Eli projected a dashboard onto brick, dots on a map, team estamps, outcomes. 2-minute honored 72%. They said, working on the other 28. Top failure reasons. Forgot. Manager said no. Bartender said weird. Countermeasure. Bartender module called You poor. You lower. App outage Saturday. Nora added 40 minutes. We posted paper protocol. Staff honored anyway. Paper beats phones when the world's on fire. 3 partners left the map. Gwen said, we replaced a manager at 1. We didn't chase the other 2. Rooms have standards. Houses can keep their furniture. Harold updated kitchen protocols. Posting room temp is a choice over the pass. He said, laminated. Line cooks don't read essays. Publish failure first. Geeta said, lead with the graph that makes me queasy. They posted the report on a plain page with no branding and too much honesty. The first paragraph was a bruise. Times the lamp wasn't honored, places it failed. 1 table that left. The second paragraph held the light differently. Abuse drivers quote, it's easier to lower than to apologize. A librarian's line, quiet is a civic service. A dishwasher's note, written in block pencil, we tap for each other now when the machine screams. The cork board in the quiet room grew a spine. First pin. The bus driver's sign, tapped twice in Sharpie that had bled in rain. Second, a deli receipt with a tip line that said, for the hush. Third, a hinge card from a barber front, angle body, hands visible, wait where you were left. Back, buzz later. Bryce swung back through, cologne paid for by someone else. You're missing a moment, he said, dropping a glossy deck on a chair. Gala season. Chandeliers. A sponsor with a dimmer package. Chandeliers are loud, Kesha said. Not mine, he said. We craft a redemption arc. We put names on a wall. We fix reputations and fund you for a decade. Pick one, Geeta said. He smiled the way men smile when no one has left yet. You'll call, he said, and left his poster like a flag. No country wanted. The phone rang late landline, in bell tone like a time when numbers were written on fridge calendars. Nora answered. Listen, held the receiver to her chest a second. The barber on 118th, she said. Someone ripped the 2-minute sign. Sharpied the mirror. Teach your kid to behave. Kesha grabbed the lamp in its towel. Harold took a roll of tape. Gwen stuffed hinge cards into a tote. They walked into rain that smelled like old coins. The shop's floor held glass like a map of bad decisions. The barber swept with long, even strokes. Posture of a man who has trained his back to forgive. A boy in a red jacket sat in the chair. Hands flat on the armrests like small birds. Someone had scrubbed the mirror. The letters were a ghost. We brought a sign, Gwen said. She held up fresh cardstock. We lower here. Eli set the ring on the counter and tapped twice. The circle breathed. The room obeyed. Clippers paused. Conversation dropped to a key that didn't hurt. 2 minutes passed clean. The boy blinked. The clippers buzzed soft through the first inch. When the ring dimmed, Harold taped the new sign to the glass with a strip that would outlive weather. On us, Kesha said. Cost of doing city. Back at the office, she pinned the old, torn sign to the corkboard next to the bus driver's receipts. She wrote the date under it like a testimony you could staple later. Late. After the last bowl and the last lamp check-in, Marcus carried a cardboard banker's box into the room and set it down like confession. Endowment wired, he said. The money is slow now. Rules are fast. Geeta opened the lid. Inside, signed documents. A letter appointing the ombuds with authority guaranteed to irritate them later. You'll hate this in a month, she said. That means we did it right. He nodded. He had learned to enjoy hating the correct thing. They locked up on a street loud enough to remind you why you're doing it. A bus hissed, then kneeled. Somewhere down the block, someone tapped glass twice, and a driver nodded like a deacon. The river carried a pane of dark to the ocean without telling anyone. Kesha stood at the window and pressed her palm to the glass. Her print bloomed 5 lines drawn by breath. The small sixth added, because rules bend for love. Beside hers, a smaller hand rose and matched, not perfectly. The space between them looked like air. Evidence thinned. Practice held. The morning news found a new angle. It always does. A glossy anchor smiled into the lens with teeth you could slice paper on. Behind her, B-roll looped a quiet dining room. A ring lamp, pulsing above a bowl like a tame sun. Lower third. Kia table craze. Charity or spectacle. Kesha watched from the corner of a bodega that had taped a hand-lettered quiet hour sign near the lotto machine. Fluorescence hummed at a frequency that made canned soup look nervous. The owner saw the segment, reached without asking, and turned the radio off. The room exhaled. Newsprint breathed. Coffee steamed like an apology. Her phone buzzed. Ralph, she let it ring out once, then picked up. They made it official. He said, HR says, termination. Disruption of service environment. They spelled environment wrong. How long did you argue? 5 minutes, he said, which is a year in restaurant time. Tell Leo thanks, she said. Keep cooling plates. We will, he said. Your corners, still yours. She paid for coffee and 2 bananas, slid coins into the tray like a blessing, and stepped into air that smelled like last night's rain and hot bread. A camera drifted at her periphery like a wasp with manners. She kept her head down and walked. 60 floors up, the office air tasted of lemons and litigation. Marcus stood with Geeta and a man from PR, who insisted on being called brand counsel, the way people who want power try to be nouns. Public sentiment, brand counsel said, tapping a tablet where charts sloped like ski runs. They want a story. Give them a redemption arc. Rename the program. Put your name back on it. Own the narrative. I don't, Marcus said. You should. Brand counsel smiled. It's a defense. Geeta slid a folder across the table as if she were serving law on China. It's a liability, she said. Bylaws don't bend for optics. His name stays off. Governance stands. We keep publishing failure. We keep rooms working. You'll bleed for this. Brand counsel warned. Then we bleed, Marcus said, and meant it like a weather report. Down on tile that ate noise for breakfast. The deli smelled like soup that remembered grandmothers by name. Pre-shift training ran on warm air and clinking racks. The ring lamp sat on a milk crate like a halo with a job. Kesha stood at the counter with a stack of hinge cards, laminated in a kitchen full of steam. Review, she said. 2-minute truce. Tap the ring when asked. Don't narrate the kindness. Lower light. Lower voice. Stand where you can be seen without cornering anyone. Serve after. A server raised a hand, hair in an exhausted knot. What if the table next to them complains? We comp their dessert, Anita said from behind the steam, ladle lifted. Not their bad manners. Dark humor is free, Kesha added. Use it sparingly. At 6. Archie. A woman tapped the ring twice, eyes on the menu. Because asking is easier when you look at nouns. The ring breathed, conversations softened, a fork paused mid-air. At the bar, a man performed impatience into his phone like a sermon to no one. The room lowered without requiring his consent. 2 minutes later, dessert still tasted like sugar. His steak was still warm. He left a good tip out of habit. Habits save cities more often than speeches. By afternoon, the glossy profile dropped. Margaret in soft light, sleeves rolled, gaze calibrated to concern. She said stability, as if she held the patent. The photos paired her with windows and a bowl of green apples. No one had bitten. A last paragraph floated inappropriate proximity the way you float a rumor in a glass of brandy. Somewhere else in the city, water fell from Kesha's ceiling in a thin, patient thread. She stood on a chair with a pot in her hands, catching the steady. The super knocked, peered, shrugged. Radiator upstairs. He said, I'll get to it. She set the pot down. The riverside photo on her table had caught a drop, ink-feathered. Denise's hand blurred. The star sticker on C ran to a milky smear. Kesha pressed paper towels like compresses, knowing the gesture was theater. She traced the smeared star with a thumbnail, jaw set with a practicality that kept grief from growing teeth. Loss announces itself without music. The ceiling ticked. Her phone buzzed. Gwen, you seeing this profile? Kesha, ceiling leak, priorities. Gwen, bring tape. We'll make a roof. She propped the photo on the radiator to dry, watched it wave itself into a geography she didn't recognize, and let her hands go still. No prayer, just breath. Near dusk, Bram arrived at the borrowed office like a man unlearning a posture. Banker's box, sleeves rolled. He set it down on the scarred table. Court orders, filings, compliance packet, chain of custody tags. He said, you'll need them when a reporter pretends not to know what a log is. Geeta arched an eyebrow. And why are you helping us? Because I drafted a motion I couldn't respect, he said. And because my mother rode the 27 yesterday and asked why her driver had a quiet sign. When I told her, she said it was about time the city learned its manners. Gwen glanced at the corkboard where someone had pinned a bus driver's tap twice with tidy thumbtacks. The ink had bled from weather and still held its vowels. Your mother free on Thursdays? She asked. Board loves people who tell men no. She's excellent at it, Bram said, and tried on a smile that didn't fit yet. The next morning's status conference tasted like printer, ink, and coffee that had fought through a filter twice. Judge D'Angelo called the room to order, fluorescent lights at war with dignity. She ticked compliance like a grocery list care plan filed. Accommodations established. App logs admissible as business records. Then she added a line of law that made a clerk look up. Courtrooms in this county shall maintain a sensory-friendly option upon request. The court reporter's hands typed a future. In the hall, Marcus shifted a binder from one hand to the other. Thank you, he told Geeta. Don't thank me, she said. Sign the checks. Show up to board. Don't improvise. He turned to Kesha. Your job. He started, then stopped. He was good at offers. Less good at not making them sound like ownership. I already work here, she said, meaning lamp, logs, rooms, rice, pay staff. Depends on time. That's your job. He nodded, newly fluent in yes. Training at the deli rolled into night. Anita set down a bowl of matzo balls like diplomacy. The ring glowed softly between pickles and the tip jar. A boy in a red jacket tapped with the concentration of a surgeon. The room obeyed. 2 minutes hung and dissolved. The clippers down the block went quiet. At the same moment someone else had tapped, and the city accidentally harmonized. My grandmother called this Sabbath quiet, Anita said, ladling. Even on a Tuesday, sundown ritual, Eli murmured to himself, already making a note, eyes bright with a dangerous idea that might save a city. 2 minutes at solstice. Kesha checked her phone. The super, fixed, mostly, sorry for mess. She pictured the photo on the radiator, the bruise where a star had run. She put the phone down and straightened the napkin holder with 2 fingers, then left it crooked because perfection is the enemy of room. Bram stopped by with a screwdriver dangling from his shirt pocket. Got a door that sticks? He asked. I'm trying to bribe my guilt with hinges. 2nd floor, Kesha said. Consent. Bram replied, and went to kneel where the building complained. Evening slouched toward itself, in a living room that had mistaken itself for a yacht. Margaret stared at her profile on a phone screen until her face stopped being a face. She put the device down like a hot pan. In a different room that smelled like baseboard steam and lemon dish soap, Kesha and Gwen replaced the Riverside photo's glass. It wasn't the same. Good, Gwen said. Same got us here. Kesha taped 3 tiny stars to the back, where no one would look. C. F. G home keys you could carry in a pocket. The app went live with a quiet update and no press release. A diner on Queens Boulevard toggled yes. 2 hair salons in the Bronx tapped add. A bodega in Sunset Park wrote "We Lower" in block letters on a chalkboard and drew a crude star that looked more like a spider. The map dotted like constellations migrating south. The ombuds inbox filled with the city. Host didn't know what we meant until she did. Manager said we don't do special treatment and learned he was wrong. 2 minutes felt like a bath after a storm. 2 minutes wasn't enough. Patterns developed teeth. Geeta circled failures with a pen that loved accountability. Bigger, she told Eli. Make the failure graphs bigger. Brand counsel reappeared with a smile like an invoice. The narrative is getting away from you, he said. We can stage a gala, chandeliers that dim, sponsors who love their names. Chandeliers are loud, Kesha said. Not mina. He lied. Redemption, sell, not our product, Geeta said. He left his deck on a chair like a handkerchief no one wanted. Nora slid it into recycling with 2 fingers. The week found its hinge. The court order hardened into habit. Judges lowered lights. Without thinking about why, restaurant managers moved the ring button closer to the register. Abuse driver laminated his sign. A barber learned to say buzz later like a joke and a policy. A librarian added 2 minute, observed to the bottom of the open mic flyer, and learned the difference between silence and hush. The city tore because it's a city. The barber's mirror. The night after the profile wore Sharpie. Teach your kid to behave. They cleaned it with patience and tape and a ring lamp that glowed above broken glass. They brought soup and a sign that read, "We lower here," and pinned the torn one to the corkboard under receipts. Hinge cards spread like pocket catechisms, angle body, hands visible. Wait where you were left. On the backs, lines in other people's handwriting. Small essays. You didn't have to read to obey. Soup won't run away. Buzz later. Your voice isn't a hammer. A knock on a plain door delivered a small blessing. The librarian returned the ring lamp at 9. Eyeliner smudged by honest tears. It worked, she said. A poet froze, and someone tapped, and the pause held her without dropping her. She initialed the clipboard with a flourish that looked like a door left open. Chain of custody, Nora said, and logged it. Kesha sat on the piano bench and put her fingers where stickers used to be. C, F, G. She didn't play. She let the wood keep the chord in its bones. Beside the bench, a folded paper towel someone had used to dry a bowl lay with a star, drawn in condensation, lines crooked and perfect. No sixth. A rule not bending, only resting. Her phone buzzed again. Eli, the solstice is in 2 weeks. Imagine if the whole map lowered at once. Kesha looked up at the ring lamp, asleep and dependable. 2 minutes. She texted back. Everywhere. Across the river, wind combed the water into rose. In the window's reflection, she watched a city try on a new habit and not hate it. Somewhere, a driver tapped glass twice, and a bus obeyed like a machine with manners. Somewhere, a dishwasher hummed an A minor under the machine's scream and felt it answer. Somewhere, a mother put a coat over a sleeping child and whispered, "Done," without triumph, only correctness. Evidence would evaporate on schedule, stars in breath, ink in rain, kindness without receipts. The corkboard would keep what it could, the rest would live in hand, tapping, lowering, waiting where they were left. 2 minutes, then another, then, maybe, a solstice. The hinge was the first to complain, a thin metal wail as the side door overswung and remembered its age. Bram crouched with a screwdriver between his teeth, the cord of a work light looping like a question mark over his shoulder. Morning washed the quiet room in winter squares, tempered glass catching a sideways sun and slicing it into geometry on the floor. "Consent," he muttered, tightening a strike plate a quarter turn. "Doors should say yes without shouting." "Put it on a tote," Gwen said, hauling a crate of laminated visual schedules. She set them on the folding table and dusted chalk from her palms. The radiator ticked once-old metal, clearing its throat. Kesha taped the day's pod schedule to the wall. Practice. Snack. 2 minute, then smoothed the corner with her thumb. The riverside photo watched from the shelf under new glass. The star on C bled to a purple bruise that refused to be ashamed. The ring lamp slept, a halo with a day job. Geeta arrived with a legal folder fat enough to leave an imprint. "We've got a visit at 11, she said, voice calm as a metronome. CPS. An anonymous report finally found a desk. Harold froze mid-ladle. Noor stopped halfway through a muffin that had lied to her on the wrapper. Eli's fingers hovered over a keyboard. The cursor blinked like an arrhythmic heart. "What do they think we are?" Gwen asked. "Words. Boundary. Exploitation. Unlicensed." Geeta said, "Smells like someone's perfume from a glossy profile." Kesha rolled her shoulders back. "We start as if they weren't coming," she said. "We end on a win." By 10, the room breathed in measurable rhythms. A grandmother traced icons with a finger-like prayer. A teenager taught a smaller kid how to tap the ring without turning it into theater. The upright kept its own counsel, wood holding a memory of C, F, G. At 10, Wushaba, 2 parkas, with badges stepped through Bram's reformed door. The lead introduced herself with a nod and a card. R. Holloway, Child Protective Services. Her partner, F. Dara, scanned the room lamp. Schedules, posted Wright's eyes, landing on a hand-lettered sign. 2 minute on request. "We received a report," Holloway said. "We're following up. Welcome." Geeta answered, palms visible, voice low. "I'm counsel. We can review the care plan, releases, logs, We'll accommodate while we talk. Holloway's gaze returned to the ring lamp. Accommodations, she murmured. That's new. It's older than us. Gwen said. We finally wrote it down. At the table, Gita laid out a stack. Carré plan, court order, training attestations, incident logs. Orange chain of custody stickers glowed on the edges, like traffic cone. Holloway slid on reading glasses and read, the little muscles at her jaw doing the work of due diligence. Mandated reporters, she asked, not looking up. Clinicians by license, staff by policy, Noor said. And you? Dara asked Kesha. I document actions, not diagnoses, Kesha said. Verbs, not nouns. Show me, Holloway said. Kesha pulled the photocopied manager's log from Leonard. Dimmer levels and plate temperatures, scribbled in chef's hand. A pianist's set list, annotated with half pedal and minor. Screenshots from the app, 2-minute activations. Time stamps. Outcomes quiet turned into data. Holloway paged through. Dara's shoulders unhooked half an inch, the way men do when paperwork picks up a weight they didn't admit they were carrying. Let's see the child, Holloway said. We can honor the room first. Kesha offered. We keep light under 40 lux during transitions. Questions aren't used as weapons. Holloway paused, then nodded toward the lamp. 2 minutes, she said, tasting it. I'll try yours. Eli tapped the app. The ring blossomed warm. Conversations settled like snow. The upright's low strings hummed without being touched. In the left pane of glass, someone's breath found fog and drew a 5-pointed star, then added a 6th, the city's new habit, light as a suggestion. When the lamp dimmed itself, the room rose without feeding the noise. Jaime stood near the window, tracing 5 lines with scientific care. Marcus angled his body, hands visible, not auditioning for fatherhood, simply present. Holloway watched the boy tap "Doan" on a laminated square with solemn authority, the tiny click of plastic telling more truth than a paragraph. Allégations, mentions, exploitation, Holloway said to Gita, eyes still on the room. Compensation. Consultant, stipends, at market, board approved. W-2 or 1,099 by choice. Gita said, no exposure pay, we're boring on purpose. Good, Holloway said, boring keeps kids fed. She closed the folder and left a card. We'll mark it unsubstantiated, she said. Unsubstantiated isn't unwatched. Keep your logs. Keep your lamp. Then, to no one in particular, someone should lower lights in courtrooms. She had read the order. She approved. When the door latched, the room let out a plank-held breath. Harold wiped an already clean counter. Eli exhaled a laugh that wasn't humor. Billable miracle, they said. Do we invoice the universe? Rice will do, Harold said. Noon put sandwiches on a scarred table and bylaws on a wall. Failures first, Gita announced. Nora clicked a cheap projector. Eli showed graphs where mistakes took more real estate than wins. 2 minute. Not honored 28% of the time during peak. Eli said. Reasons logged. Forgot. Manager veto. Bartender said weird. A beat. We built a bar module called You Poor, You Lower. App 40-minute outage on Saturday. Nora added. Paper protocol posted. Staff honored anyway. Phones are delicate. Paper's a cockroach. 3 restaurants left the map, Gwen said. We replaced 1 manager. Didn't chase the other 2. Rooms have standards. Harold slid a sheet onto the table. Kitchen protocol, Rev 1. San. Room temp on request. Post the phrase where the pass can see it. And please no microgreens on kids' plates. Noor and Mateo held up index cards. Hinga cards. Matteo said. Front. Angle body. Hands visible. Wait where you were left. Back. Write your line that worked. He read examples like small poems. Soup won't run away. Buzz later. Motion to adopt hinge cards. Gita said. Second, Lena said, barreling in late with a poster tube and a grin. Hands rose. Marcus lifted his halfway. Advisory, he said, not a vote. Respect has a sound. The room let it stand. The door opened again. Bryce swept in trailing cologne, and a concept. He dropped a glossy mock-up on a chair gala. Chandeliers. A dimmer you could mortgage. You're leaving money on the table? He said, I can sell you a night. Chandeliers are loud, Kesha said, without looking up. Not mina, he said. We publish failure. Gita reminded, it doesn't test well in ballrooms. He smiled with incisors. You'll call when you need me. Receipts, Nora said after he left, and fed the deck to the blue bin. Afternoon cracked the new window with a hairline zigzag like thinking. A kid pressed his ear to it and declared it sounded like rain. Bram taped an X and measured for tempered replacement. We can add UV film, he said. Add teeth, Gita replied. I'm tired of glass being the only thing between us and noise. Near 5. The lamp blinked awake without anyone touching their phone. Eli checked the sensor. Auto trigger, they said. If decibels spike and 3 bodies step back at once, the ring asks for quiet. Body led. Noor nodded, like a nervous system. Consent, Bram reminded. Make it ask. Eli edited the prompt. Is 2 minutes okay? The ring learned to wait for a tap like a patient dog. The last interruption arrived without cameras. Margaret stepped in with a coat she didn't plan to be photographed in and hands that didn't know where to live. She stopped just inside, reading the room like weather. We won't litigate in here. Gita said, I didn't come to win. Margaret said, surprising no one more than herself. I want to understand what you think this is. Rooms. Gwen answered, that work, it feels like a cult. Margaret tried the sentence, reaching for teeth, and coming up, baby. It's practice, Kesha said. No hymns, just verbs. And me, Margaret asked. It wasn't a trap. It was a woman announcing she'd misplaced her nouns. Carry bowls, Kesha said, pointing with her chin at Harold's wrist. Don't narrate. Margaret carried. Corner 2. A boy in a dinosaur hoodie glanced and didn't flinch. Soup landed at room temp. She returned for more. Sleeves slipping, shoulders discovering their hinge. For 11 minutes she was a pair of hands. When she set the last bowl down, she exhaled a life she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I can't promise I'll stop trying to win, she said, not looking at anyone. Learn. Gita told her, bring verbs. Margaret nodded once and left. The hinge refused to squeal for her, which felt like fairness. Bram watched the door close with the face of a man whose religion had recently become maintenance. They cleaned, chairs up, counters wiped. The ring tapped to sleep with a gentle touch. The cracked pane wore tape like bravery. On the corkboard, the bus drivers tapped twice, shared pushpins with the barbers, we lower here, and a deli receipt that said, for the hush. Eli stuck a note under the deckless space Bryce had vacated. Noise. Marcus handed Harold bowls. Towel over his shoulder like an amateur line cook. None of this redeems anything, he said into the steam. Good. Harold answered, Redemption melts. This holds. Kesha sat on the piano bench and pressed a silent chord C, F, G fingertips on ivory where stickers had once lived. The wood kept the notes. She didn't play. You don't put scores on small victories. You let them breathe. Gwen dragged a chair stack into line. Keep something, she said. Endings need anchors. On the shelf, the archive box, held its square of time date in Sharpie, a small star, glue already turning brittle. Beside it, Nora slid a clear sleeve with a folded paper towel, child's damp handprint, a star traced in condensation, crooked and perfect. Na sixth line, the refusal, a kind of law, chain of custody, Nora said softly, initialing the margin. Outside, a bus sighed, and a teenager tapped twice with chapped knuckles. The cabin accepted instruction without demanding a speech. The ring lamps around the map closed their eyes in sequence library. Diner, bodega, as if the city had agreed on bedtime. Kesha pressed her palm to the quiet room glass. Jaime added his beside it. Their stars didn't align. The space between them looked like breath. The prince bloomed, thinned, vanished on schedule. They kept their hands there anyway. The agenda hit inboxes at 6:03 a.m. Bland to the point of malice. Committee on Civic Partnerships Streamlining Oversight Draft. 16 pages of verbs that like to hide consolidate. Align. Rationalize ending with a clause that would fold their board under a body that also graded stadium tax breaks. Geeta printed it, didn't swear, and taped the PDF to the quiet room wall at eye level. We go, she said. Bring receipts. Kesha arrived with a ring lamp wrapped in a towel and deli coffee that smelled like courage and burnt sugar. She skimmed the bill, lips pressed, thumb tapping the margin where the paper had a nick. They want our teeth. They want our quiet, Gwen said, dropping a stack of petitions that had grown signatures like ivy overnight. And they want to name it Map. Who said yes? Eli murmured, already coaxing dots out of the app restaurants. Libraries. A barber. A bus route that had learned a new gesture. And who said no? With daylight, Harold labeled a crate of rice bowls, courtesy, not charity, with a squeaky Sharpie. Noor slid the quarterly failure report into a manila folder, as if it were a relic. Bram pocketed a screwdriver like a talisman. City Hall doors hate winter, he said. Everything swells and pretends it's principal. The hearing room loved echo, limestone, brass, a chandelier that buzzed when no one clapped. 5 brass nameplates on the dais. One of them, the smile from ribbon cutting. Councilman Keenan Roch. Unflappable in a way that flaps in private. Order, he said, gavel neat as a metronome. We're here to discuss streamlining oversight for public non-profit partnerships. His staffer read into the record in a voice that had learned neutrality as a second language efficiency. Alignment. Safeguards. Beautiful words with bones set to break muscles like theirs. Public comment. Roche announced 3 minutes each. Geeta went first. No preamble. This bill erases independent governance that keeps children from harm, she said. Steady, personal without confession. Our board is public and purposeful. Families, clinicians, workers. Yours is political. We publish failure by policy. You publish wins by press release. Don't take our lamp and stick a logo on it. A murmur. Then stillness. The clerk's pen scratched. That official insect. Anita from the deli stepped up with a white paper bag breathing steam. She set it on the dais without asking. Matzo ball soup, she said. Room temp. By request. We learned that here, thumb toward the row where Kesha sat, I have 2 minutes for anyone who taps. I don't need a gala to keep my lights on. Don't make me beg for the hush. Your constituents already bless. A bus driver in a jacket scuffed to the color of weather tapped the lectern twice. The sound carried through wood and into ribs. 2 suits flinched, then arranged their faces into reason. That's what it sounds like on my route, he said. We honor it. You should too. An older woman in a church hat held up the app's paper map. 6 red circles trembling in her hand. These dots are where I can take my grandson after church, she said. He likes soup, and not being taught to be sorry. A principal spoke, a dishwasher whose hands wrote a second language on stainless every night. A librarian who said the word policy like a blessing. Margaret took the mic in a coat she hadn't bought for photographs. The air changed key. She looked less lacquered, more dangerous. I support oversight, she said. Oversight saves children from people who think they know best. Who sits on your board? Geeta asked from the audience. It wasn't her turn. She asked anyway. Professionals, Margaret said after a beat. The words swallowed, families whole. Phones buzzed on the dais like bees falsifying spring. Eli had slipped a thread into the committee. Slack screenshots forwarded from a friend inside a different office. Roche's chief of staff to a donor with a stadium logo. We can fold the quiet program under us. Optics are good. Donor seats possible. Attached, an invoice from an event environment vendor that sold $10,000 dimmers. Roche blinked, recovered, smiled. Recess, he said, gaveling the air as if it were a nail. In the hall, the floor was marble trying to be ice. Staffers fanned out with the desperate calm of people herding smoke. Bram leaned toward Kesha. He's dead, he said. He just hasn't met the obituary yet. Not yet. Geeta warned. We don't become them. At the far window, a boy fogged a circle with his mouth and drew 4 lines of a star, then stalled. Gwen walked over diagonal, hands visible, no demand. He drew the 5th, and then, practice now, a 6th. The city's new semantics. 2 taps somewhere softened 3 conversations by accident. The janitor kept pushing his cart, slower, because the room asked. When the committee reconvened, Roche owned a new face, fresh brief, old habits. We will amend, he said. The pronunciation of mercy from someone who sells knives. Language to preserve independent boards with a city liaison. Put it in writing, Geeta said. Publish before vote. We'll consider, he said, discovering that the microphone magnified indecision. The rest limped. People who loved language laid traps with it. People who loved power fell in. The gavel found wood. The hearing dissolved back into limestone. Outside, the sky had decided on gray. Wind carried grit that tasted like paper clips. They walked back with their lamp wrapped in a towel, petitions heavy with names, phones dinging with 2-minute photos from nowhere they'd paid to be. The quiet room looked smaller after stone and echo. That usually meant it was the right size. Kesha rehung the printed agenda beside the corkboard, pinning it under the bus driver's TAP twice, with 2 red tacks like a butterfly allowed to live. Noor let the overheads down a notch. The room corrected itself. Library asked if they can borrow a lamp for an open mic. Eli said, eyes bright. They promised the truce. Chain of custody. Nora deadpan. Passing a clipboard. Initials on pickup and return. Audit ready. They had an hour of ordinary rice steam. Visual schedules. A kid learning that you can leave a line unfinished and not die from it before the call from the barber. Gwen answered, listened. Her face did weather. They ripped the sign, she said, sharpied the mirror. Teach your kid to behave. Kesha took the towel-wrapped lamp without speaking. Harold grabbed tape, a roll of cardstock, and a Sharpie that squealed. Bram pocketed a second screwdriver. Anita materialized at the door as if pulled by obligation. 2 soups. 1 hot, 1 room temp. Bring back the ladle, she said. Maternal and iron. The shop smelled like talc and apology. Hair glittered on black and white tile. The mirror wore a gray bruise where someone had scrubbed hate until it smeared into geology. The barber held a push broom, like a lowered flag. "They'll be back," he said. "Not a prediction, an inventory." "We will too," Kesha answered. Eli taped "We lower" here over the scar. Gwen posted a hinge card under the clipper shelf. Buzz later. Harold set soups on the counter. A boy in a red jacket climbed into the chair, hands perched like birds, eyes on the lamp. Kesha raised the ring until it met his gaze. He tapped. The room breathed. The clippers whispered against the nape of his neck. He didn't flinch. Outside, a man slowed and stared, complicated nouns slick in his eyes. He kept walking. The hinge of the door said yes when he pushed it, because Bram had been there first. They took a picture of the repaired sign, sent it to the Ombud's inbox, with a subject line that made Gita write it down in 2 places. Receipts. Back at the quiet room, a poster had been shoved under the door. Bryce's gala mock-up, corner bent. Someone's handwriting across the satin render. "Your dimmer is too loud." Eli pinned it on the corkboard, under a sticky labeled "Noise." The room snorted once and let it stay. Phones pinged. Amendment published. Pilot exemption, preserving independent boards. The taste of concession spiked with ownership. "It'll hold," Gita said, reading lines like X-rays. For now's a unit," Nora said, and wrote it into the calendar where dates sleep. Evening crawled toward the horizon like something wounded and proud. Kesha stood on a chair and turned the overheads down 1 step. The radiator caught its key. Eli mapped fresh dots. 2 bodegas newly lit. A diner willing to try. A choir rehearsal that had decided 2 minutes might be holy. The city's constellation thickened. A text arrived from a number Kesha had saved as M, for reasons that made sense to her. "I can be useful tonight. No cameras. Just hand." She typed, "Doa, at 6. If you can carry bowls, carry bowls." The dots appeared, disappeared. The message didn't answer. That felt like an answer. They practiced for sundown without naming it. The librarian signed the lamp out with an N that looked like a propped door. Bram traced extension cords with gaffer tape. Noor checked Lux 40 at the corners, 35 by the window. Harold wrote "Soup at your tempo" on a masking tape label because he couldn't help himself. The bus driver stopped in with a stack of tap twice cards printed on stolen PTA cardstock, initials legible like a sermon. "Hold when the light goes," Nora called, watching the sky like a sailor. "Always," Gita said. They would not win the city. They wouldn't try. They would make rooms. They would collect evidence of rooms. They would pin it to cork and to policy and to people's hands. They would fail in public and publish the failure, and someone with a budget would learn envy. At sundown, they lowered without ceremony. Inside the library, the lamp glowed over a mic that had been born in a school basement. On the bus, a driver tapped glass with 2 knuckles and a tired smile. In a diner on a corner that smelled like rain and old coffee, neon rephrased itself softer. In the barber shop, a boy, with a fresh line, touched the ring and watched the second hand on a cheap clock slow in his body. In the quiet room, 2 minutes sat down and asked nothing extra of anyone. A baby's cry found a pocket. A father exhaled like he'd been holding a bridge. Jaime pressed his palm to tempered glass, drew 5 lines and then a 6th, lighter, like a promise you test before you say out loud. The ring dimmed. The room rose. The hinge kept its pact. There would be another hearing. There always is. There would be another vandal with a Sharpie and a sermon about behavior. Another donor who wanted to dim the universe for a fee. Another liaison with a letter that smelled like lemon and power. For tonight, soup steamed at 2 temperatures. The app took notes without judgment. A corkboard gathered small. exact artifacts of a city deciding to try manners. Kesha slid a new pin into the map where the barber sat, where the diner had promised, where the bus route bent like a signature. She stepped back. The constellation didn't need names. It needed practice. Outside, the river wore a scab of light. Wind pushed grit against her teeth. She tasted paper and laughed. Dark humor is free. You spend it carefully. Her phone buzzed once again. 2 words. Carried bowls. No period. No photo. She didn't reply. She didn't have to. Bram oiled the door one more time on his way out. Consent, he whispered to the hinge, because he liked winning arguments with metal. Evidence evaporates on schedule. Receipts do not. The inspector's tape hissed out of its metal shell like a warning snake. He hooked the silver tongue to the baseboard under the quiet room window and tugged it until the line went straight and mean. Morning light turned the tempered glass into a grid of pale squares on the floor. Dust floated in it like slow snow. 46 inches, he muttered, pencil scarring. A duplicate form. His badge read quarterly, life safety, in a font that had never lifted anything heavier than paper. Ventilation, his partner asked, voice flat with experience. The partner had shop teacher hands, and a bandage gone soggy at one knuckle. Harold rolled out the ladder. Aluminium feet ticked on the linoleum. He popped the grill and let old-school air breathe. Noor held a cheap particle meter to the duct and read numbers like a medic calling pulse. Within code, she said. Within reason. Bram tightened a hinge screw, a quarter turn without being asked. The side door, which had wailed in a thin, metal falsetto, every time weather changed its mind, sighed, and consented. Doors should say yes without shouting, he told the hinge, the way some men tell dogs to stay. The inspector flipped pages, hunting for a sin worth the morning. Occupancy is posted. Nora tapped a laminated sign. 15 if piano sleeps, 12 if it sings. He kept searching. It was habit as much as mandate. Where's the permit amendment for the ring lamp? Geeta slid a stapled packet across the table, with that particular lawyerly indifference. That means we packed for this exact conversation. Filed. Stamped. Boring on purpose. He signed with a chewed pen that had survived municipal winters. Provisional pass, pending noise. The form tore free with the tired sound of paper remembering trees. Noise. Kesha Echued. But the answer walked in behind him. A liaison in a sport coat the color of compromise, city pin shining like an apology, unfolded a letter with careful fingers. He smelled like lemon and ambition. Temporary administrative hold, he said, as if pronouncing rights. Due to concerns about duplication of services and public confusion. From whom? Geeta asked. From a liaison, he said, without blushing, who prefers not to be named while considering public input. Silence set. The radiator ticked like a metronome that had been told to wait. Out in the hallway, a child ran a palm along painted cinder block to hear the soft drum of it. The sound found the room and stayed. We can't open, Gwen said. Not outrage inventory. Not until clarified. The liaison folded the letter into a smaller cruelty. Harold wrote clarified on a sticky note and slapped it to the coffee urn. Sweeteners on the left. He said, sarcasm's free. Kesha looked at the tempered glass. A small hand lay against it on the other side and left a star that bloomed and thinned in 3 breaths. We'll hold 2 minutes, she said. Then we'll go downtown. City Hall preferred echo to oxygen. The lobby smelled like sanitizer and a scared sandwich. Roche's office waited behind glass, with his name printed generous enough to make you small. Eli sat on a bench, and made the ring lamp pulse with a thumb, not as theater, more as calibration of a nervous system. Roche opened the door with the face men wear when they expect cameras and find people instead. "What can I do for you?" he asked, voice varnished. "You can lift the hold," Gita said, "or you can watch an ethics committee develop a taste for your calendar. It's an administrative pause," he said. "We need alignment." "Alignment with what?" Nora asked from behind Keisha, the way an accountant asks a burglar where he keeps the receipts. "With city priorities," Roach said, locating a tone that had worked on ribbon cutting. "We can't have 100 programs doing their own thing. We have one thing," Gwen said, listening. "It scales." He turned to Kesha, trying the old condescension on a new body. "You're a server," he began. "We need professionals," she finished for him, gentle as a knife, slid back into a block. "I'm a professional at keeping rooms from breaking children." Eli set a phone on the desk, screen up. A thread forwarded through a chain of the careless. "Hold slows them. We fold them later. Donor seats available." An invoice from an event environment vendor for $10,000 dimmers looked back at him with perfect kerning. "That's private," Roach said. "Not today," Gita said. "Here's the trade. You lift the hold, draft an amendment that preserves independent boards, publish it before lunch. Or we photocopy your inbox until the marble cracks." He stared at his hands like they might offer strategy. "They didn't." "We'll review. You'll comply," Gita said, then smiled, because sometimes you have to show teeth to remind a man he has gums. Back in the room that had learned its own weather, the closed for administrative review sign felt like a lie told by a hallway. People knocked anyway. The barber came with an envelope of hair like glitter and a story no one should have to tell about a mirror and a marker. Anita arrived with soup, initialed A with a star on every lid, and said, "Chain of custody is serious." Kesha set the riverside photo on the table. It had ridden the radiator twice, bled a little around C, and survived a leak with a new river running through Denise's knuckle. It had become a relic by accident, a frame for a room that no longer existed. "Break it," Gwen said, soft and surgical. "I can fix thing," Bram offered, already reaching for a putty knife. "No," Kesha said. She undid the cheap metal tabs, lifted the cardboard back, and slid the photo into a manila envelope Nora had labeled Archive, CNSE, in block letters that would survive fire. The sound was nothing, a whisper of paper on paper, and it knocked the air sideways anyway. Sacrifices rarely clang. Mostly they fold. "Top shelf," she told Nora, "where donors can't touch, and we still can." Nora slid the envelope into a banker's box that already held the first court order, the first tap twice sign, the first angry ombud's email that proved the thing had a pulse. She wrote a date, drew a small, imperfect star, and pushed the box up until it kissed the beam. The hold lifted by email at 4:11 p.m. No apology. Pilot exemption to preserve independent boards. Liaison language left in like a thorn you live with. "It will hold until someone wants it not to," Gita said. "We'll nail our receipts to it." They turned the sign. The hinge said yes. The first family filtered in the way weather does. When it trusts the barometer, the ring lamp breathed. Rice steamed. A baby discovered that silence is a verb. The sacrifice that required a spine came 2 days after the paper unclenched. Marcus sat on the quiet room's piano bench, like a man waiting for bad news he had written to himself. His blazer was an ordinary gray. His tie stayed in his pocket. "I'm stepping down," he said. "Not performance report. C.E. Oh." The sentence rearranged the air. No one clapped. You don't have to, Gwen said, because good rooms challenge saints and villains the same way. I do, he said. The board wants the foundation to be a brand with a chandelier problem. I can't keep this out of its mouth if I keep mine open in that room. He held out a letter with 3 signatures that had learned to exist without love. It's filed. I can't promise this buys redemption, Gita said. Good, he said. I'm done shopping. Jaime pressed his palm to the tempered glass. 5 lines. A 6th. Lighter. He tapped his chest for done, the sign he'd invented. Marcus didn't reach for him. He stood where he'd been left and let the boy's orbit choose whether to widen. They published nothing about his resignation. The paper did. The analysts yawned and sharpened their knives. The stock line dipped like a head in church. The ring lamp breathed right on time. Self-destruction chose its stage without asking anyone's calendar. The ethics committee's hearing room smelled like printer ink and old weather. The chandelier buzzed overhead with the tin despair of a copy that knows it's a copy. The chairwoman read from a motion that had run out of patience. Undisclosed donor coordination. Attempted interference with independent governance. In exchange for access, Roche tried to build a sentence with public, private, and discovered the microphone did not admire it. Money isn't weather, the chairwoman said. Sit. Margaret testified, not about hotel curtains or custody or who is a spectacle about emails with her name in the CC field drifting like oil, about donor seats that would have made her a co-conspirator by attendance, independent matters. She said, donor seats are not seats. Then, Kieter, I was wrong. Court reporters own fast hands. Hers smoke. Bram submitted an affidavit about the hold letter and the dimmer invoices and his mother on the 27 bus, tapping twice like a metronome for decency. He didn't try to sound like a man who had changed sides. He sounded like a hinge that had learned. Roche sank by inches. Then all at once, he reached for a smile and found an invoice. He reached for a gavel with a sentence and found a motion to censure. He resigned into a manila folder. They opened for the evening as if government were a rumor. The librarian brought the ring lamp back with a crease in her sleeve and a promise the open mic would keep the truce forever. She signed the clipboard with ink that bled a little. Because paper is alive, a city inspector wandered through it close with a decibel meter and a look that said mandatory overtime. He paused, registered 2 sleepers on coats in the corner, and chose to initial Nora's ledger instead of writing the citation his training had loaded into his hand. For the record, he said, taking a plastic spoon of Anita's soup, that's the right temperature, and left with a secret. 2 hours later, the diner on Woodside added itself to the app, with a photo of a neon sign trying to be kind. The barber replaced his mirror with tempered glass and taped "We Lower Here" to the corner with unnecessary pride. The bus depot posted a memo on a corkboard with a thumbtack older than most drivers. Tap twice honored. Underneath, someone had drawn a star without the 6th line. The omission looked deliberate. Late, they held a memorial that wasn't one. Noor shelved the archive box. Gwen took a strip of blue painter's tape and wrote CFG small on the underside of the piano bench, where only fingers would discover the home keys by accident. Eli cut power to the overheads, left the ring lamp low, and watched the room find its own breath. Keisha pressed middle C with her left-hand wood. Vire, felt, and didn't play. The chord held anyway. She pressed her palm to the tempered glass. The print bloomed and thinned and left no evidence but warmth. She kept her hand there anyway. Outside, Abu Sayed, a teenager, tapped twice and felt a machine obey without asking for a reason. The driver nodded like a deacon. Inside, Harold rinsed soup bowls to a rhythm that had learned minor. Nora closed the cash box and wrote a number that matched another number. Gita locked a drawer that contained no secrets, only signatures. Evidence evaporates on schedule. Receipts do not. The hinge held. The lamp slept. And somewhere, in a room the city hadn't noticed yet, a hand reached for a dimmer and chose instead to lower a voice. Wind came in off the river with a blade in it. The tempered glass of the quiet room caught the low winter sun and sliced it into squares across the floor, warm islands you could hop between if you were young enough to try. The hinge on the side door didn't complain anymore. Bram had replaced the screws and whispered to metal until it remembered how to say yes. Kesha marked the day's grid on the wall with a Sharpie that squeaked pods, lunch, practice, open mic loadout, sundown. She pressed harder on that last word until the ink thickened into certainty. The room smelled like citrus rinds, forgotten in a pocket and baseboard steam that had finally made peace with December. Maps alive, Eli said, hunched over a laptop that breathed heat like a small animal. Dots pulsed across the city. Diners, bodegas, 2 libraries that liked forgiveness, a barber stubborn enough to lower his clippers rather than the kid. Bustipo Zine. Dispatch added a channel for quiet requests. They labeled it twice. Chain of custody on lamps, Nora asked, already holding a clipboard like a verdict that wanted signatures. Diner ID verified, Eli said. Library signed. Barber will return his in soup and compliments. Harold set a tray of rice bowls under a towel so the air wouldn't steal their softness. Room temp by request, otherwise hot enough to mean winter. He nodded toward the ring lamp. I'll keep a hand near the plug. Fire code likes to feel included. Gita arrived with a folder thick enough to bruise. She set it down, squared the corners. Ethics Committee published, she said, uses independent 6 times, and forgets anyone else ever had an idea. Bylaws survive, untouched. No donor seats, no chandelier line item. She looked around the room, sober and satisfied. We did not make friends, we made rules, Kesha said. They last longer. Jaime stood at the window and fogged a circle with his breath. He drew 5 lines neatly, and then a 6th, lighter. Like a dare, Marcus waited at an angle with his hands where the boy could count them without effort. The man wore an ordinary coat, a shave he'd done in a mirror that didn't adore him, and the look of someone learning how to carry less. A librarian rolled in a canvas bag that clinked with cables and good intention. She signed for the lamp with an N that looked like an open door. Open mics at 3, she said. We'll observe the truce. She had taped a sign already. When someone taps twice, we lower. Fisher-Price theology. It would work. Anita arrived with a dolly stacked in plastic, steam trapped under clear lids. Each lid bore a star and an A in permanent marker. She initialed Nora's form with a flourish. Tell the maestro, I'll need this clipboard back, she said. Chain of custody for matzo balls is not a metaphor. Never is, Nora said, and wrote returned in a column unblessed by doubt. By mid-afternoon, teenagers drifted in with notebooks and eyes that bounced from beam to floor to other eyes. Bram checked extension cords the way you check a pulse. Mateo taped down cables with gaffer like a path over ice. Noor adjusted a shade to shave 5 lux off a corner and wrote it down like a vow. The radiator clicked out a beat. The room accepted without argument. 15 minutes. Gwen called, shouldering a crate of hinge cards. She stuck one by the door, angle body, hands visible. Wait where you were left. On the back, in her small print, leave room for a no. The open mic kids took the lamp across the street like a small moon on a pilgrimage. The door closed. The hinge said yes, then settled into the job of staying quiet. A text pinged on Kesha's phone, a number saved as M. I can be useful. No cámaras, just hands. She read it twice. Door opens at 4. Archer. If you can carry bowls, carry bowls. She typed back, then put the phone face down and gave it no more of the day than that. The barber stepped in on his break, hair flecking his cuffs like snow. He placed a replacement sign on the corkboard next to the bus driver's tap twice, block letters that knew their job. We lower here. He didn't ask permission. A city inspector wandered through with a meter and the air of a man checking boxes to qualify for sleep. He lifted the device, frowned at the low number, then saw 2 children napping on coats in a corner and initialed Nora's ledger instead of reaching for his citation pad. For the record, he said, accepting a spoon of soup like confession. That's the right temperature. He left the way honest men leave quick, without claiming credit. Eli looked up. 20 minutes to sundown. They said, eyes on the map. Dots winked from the ferry terminal to a church basement in Sunset Park, to a diner whose neon had learned to be kind. All right. Constellation. Do your thing. Hold the line. Geeta said. She wasn't talking about time. They took positions without theater. Harold by the counter. Ladle in Hunt. Nora poised with clipboards and the moral satisfaction of columns that make sense. Noor at the decibel meter. Not to police the room, but to teach it its own pulse. Bram at the hinge with a screwdriver like a superstition. Eli with a thumb over the big red button that told every lamp to breathe. Gwen near the door. The sergeant who knows when to soften and when to block. Marcus where he could be seen and not asked for. Kesha at the lamp. Now, Nora said softly, reading the sky like a sailor. Kesha tapped the ring twice. The lamp took a breath and gave one back. The room lowered as if it had practiced, which it had. Across the street, the library's lamp answered. Down the block. The barber hung his sign from a comb display and laid his clippers on a towel as if they were tired. In the diner, a server put a hand on the neon switch and chose not to. On the 27, a driver tapped the glass above his head with 2 knuckles and the bus metal, rubber. Human learned to descend without losing speed. Somewhere, an argument shifted to halftime. A dog stopped barking and looked at the window like it remembered a rule. The radiator ticked, then decided not to. Someone cried quietly, which is the rarest sound a city makes. The second minute stretched its back and lay down beside the first. At the library podium, the 4th reader, freckled kid in a hoodie, lost a line to the size of the room. Someone at the back tapped twice. The lamp glowed. The pause became structure. The rest of the poem found breath. The librarian signed the lamp back in at 9 with eyeliner smudged, and a face that wanted to close every door gently for a week. A man who had worked nights for 20 years set his fork down in the diner and, for the first time, heard the refrigerator alone. He tipped more than he could justify and walked home under streetlights that sounded less like electricity and more like warmth. At the quiet room door, a coat, darkened with dishwater, slipped in. No Yevelry. No press. Margaret lifted a stack of bowls from Harold's wrist without asking for absolution. Where? She asked. Corner 2, Gwen said, already moving. Margaret carried. She returned empty, carried again. She did not narrate. For 2 hours, she was verbs. The power flickered once. The ballast buzzed like a fly. And Noor killed the overheads at the breaker with a surgeon's decisiveness. The ring lamp kept breathing on battery. No one spooked. Practice remembered how, near the end, the bus driver stepped in with cheeks gone red from wind. He pulled extra signs from under his jacket, tapped twice, printed on old PTA stock in thick marker, and took a bowl of soup in exchange, initialing the clipboard with a block B. "Don't thank me," he said. "It's my route." "We're on it," Kesha said. The last bowl went out. The lamp dimmed itself like a tired moon. People stacked chairs without scraping. Anita reclaimed her clipboard with ceremony and a warning about lids that wander. The librarian returned the lamp without speeches. The barber took his sign and left a spare. The door kept saying yes, like a promise it enjoyed keeping. They cleaned in the key of minor. Harold rinsed to a rhythm. Nora closed a cash box that reconciled with a number in a ledger you could read in a storm. Eli noted a hiccup. A diner forgot to lower at peak, apologized in the app, moved the button nearer the register. The failure graph dipped and grew, honest as a bruise. Jaime pressed his palm to the glass and drew a star that held its shape longer than it had all week. He added a sixth line and left his finger hovering over the air like the last word of a sentence he'd invented. He tapped his chest for done. Marcus echoed him. In this room, done didn't mean finished, it meant correct. They left one small lamp on for the people who hate dark more than noise. Kesha sat on the piano bench, pressed middle C, then F, then G without sound. The wood remembered anyway. She slid a folded paper towel into a clear sleeve. Someone's damp handprint from a bowl. A fingertip star done crooked and perfect. Nora logged it. Received archive. Like evidence that would evaporate if they didn't teach it to stay. "Keep something," Gwen said, lowering a shade. "Endings need anchors." Outside, the river held a sheet of slate where light went to sleep. The bus at the curb knelt. A teenager tapped the glass twice, with a knuckle tough from winter, and felt the machine obey without demanding a reason. The driver nodded like a deacon. 2 minutes rode the bus down the block as if they'd bought a pass. Margaret folded her borrowed towel, set it by the sink, and slipped out without asking if anyone saw. Bram put 2 drops of oil on the hinge, then none, the way you stop a habit as it becomes superstition. Gita locked a drawer that contained only signatures and a pen that wouldn't lie. Harold flipped the ladle and hung it to dry. Eli watched the map dim, one lamp after another sleeping, tiny moons closing their eyes. Kesha checked the door. The hinge said yes. She pressed her palm to the glass beside the place the boy's hand had been. Her print bloomed there briefly, a soft constellation that did not need names. On the street side, breath fogged and thinned. Inside, the room held quiet like a glass holds water. Evidence evaporates on schedule. Practice doesn't. They stood there longer than was efficient, hands cooling on glass, bodies learning the shape of a city that could lower itself without permission. Across the avenue, someone at a window drew 5 lines and left the 6th hanging, not as defiance, just as possibility. A bus pulled into the dark with a soft shudder and carried 2 minutes away, and the dark, for once, met it halfway.